Good evening. Welcome, Małgorzata Bonikowska, the Center for International Relations. It's my pleasure to open with this talk, a new series we are doing together with our partner, ELNET-Poland. And the discussions, the conversations we are doing together and we are proposing to you, there are conversations about Middle East, 4 takes on the Middle East. That's not a very popular maybe subject in Poland, but we would like to make it popular and we would like many more people to understand what's going on there. And that's why we invited special guests for this series. Marta Kubica, Director of ELNET-Poland, please take the floor and present our guests.
Good evening. Thank you very much. My name is Marta Kubica. I'm the Executive Director of ELNET-Poland. We're a non-profit organization dedicated to strengthening relations between Europe and Israel based on strategic and democratic values and shared interests. I'm very happy to be able to present our great speakers straight from Israel today. Mr. Shai Bazak is a CEO of ELNET Israel. He is an experienced Israeli diplomat and public diplomacy expert who held a variety of positions in the government and private sector. Early in his political career, Mr. Bazak held the role of the media director and spokesperson for Benjamin Netanyahu, both when he was the leader of the opposition party and during his first term as the Prime Minister of Israel. Mr. Bazak also served as Israel's Israeli Consul General in several posts in the US. Our second guest that we have with us tonight is Brigadier General Michael Herzog, who is the director of the Forum of Strategic Dialogue, an international fellow at the Washington Institute for Near East Policy, and a senior fellow at BICOM and the Jewish People Policy Institute. He retired from active duty in the Israel Defense Force in the late 2010 after a long and distinguished career. Since 1993, Brigadier General Herzog was actively participating in nearly all of Israel's peace negotiations with the Palestinians, Syrians, and Jordanians, including the last round of Israeli-Palestinian negotiations. I'm very happy that you're here with us, and I can't wait to hear this amazing discussion today.
Thank you, gentlemen, General, Director, that you are with us. And let me introduce my experts, the experts of the Center for International Relations for this talk. Dr. Jerzy Wójcik, he's an expert on Israel, precisely, and generally he did his PhD also in this subject. And Dr. Bruno Surdel, who is an expert on Middle East as well, but more from the side of Syria, Turkey, and Islamic world. So, gentlemen, the first question and the most important topic of this meeting would be, well, an obvious one. Everybody of us watched the American elections, fascinating story. Until today, it's fascinating. Let's see what this change brings to the situation in the Middle East. The new administration of Joe Biden will take over in January 2021. What would you expect? What will change and what will remain? Let me start with Mr. Bazak.
Thank you very much. It's definitely, the election in the United States is definitely the most fascinating story in these days, not just because always the election in the United States is it's very interesting, and they have a very interesting story and very interesting history and very, very interesting politics, but because we, in these days, we have how to say, a different president that's stepping down now than most of the other presidents that we knew. And
but it seems like the Israeli people could regret, because your tie-ups with Donald Trump were very, very close.
Yeah, just I believe like the current government in Poland, the current government in Israel had a tight relationship with the Donald Trump administration. And we definitely appreciate very much many of the steps that he took in regards to the Middle East and Israel, which we thought are very important and very positive. For now, we see that changing in the administrations cannot be more big than the change that's going to take place now, from the far side of one side to the other side, very far away, and it's going to affect the whole world, of course, and mainly the United States itself. In regards to Israel and the Middle East, as you asked, I believe that first and foremost, of course, the Biden administration will take, of course, care of the coronavirus and the economical crisis that the United States suffers, maybe more than most of the other countries around the world. And they will have to deal with this, and probably it's going to take at least part of their first year on administration, and then they will be look around to the other issues on the ground, including the United States, the Middle East, Europe, the Iran issue, and others. To summarize my open remarks about it, Israel always made sure that we have a close relationship with the Democratic and Republican Party. United States is the most important ally of Israel for many years. We have many supporters in the United States, and Israel and the United States share a lot of share values and interest, just like we have, of course, with Europe. And we made sure in most of these years that the relationship of the governments, the parliament, and the people of Israel will be a close relationship with both sides of the political American map, and Republicans or Democrats. In the last 2 years, the problems within the American political map made the right wing and the left wing separate and go far from each other, and it's affect also the relationship with Israel. And we want to make sure, I believe, that we maintain the close relationships that we used to have with both sides of the political map in the United States. We hope it will continue this way, but changes probably will be.
Thank you for mentioning that. I think it's important always to stress that foreign policy should be really above the internal policy of any country. I think we in Poland have this issue that maybe we were too close. The government was building very close tie-up with only one party, Republican Party, which is always an issue when the other party wins, like this is the case now. General, what do you expect in terms of military and security domain?
Thank you very much, and it's a pleasure to participate in this discussion. When it comes to the new administration in the United States, everybody expects a radical change from Trump's policies, and I think that's to be expected. But many people in our region ask the question to what extent Biden will be similar to Obama, because he was part of the Obama administration. Many people around him were part of the Obama administration, and some people talk in terms of a third Obama term, which I think is highly exaggerated.
Just to remind all the viewers that Joe Biden was the vice president with Obama for 8 years. So definitely some people will maybe repeat in the administration.
So by way of general characterization, I would say some very general things about the Biden administration that we can already assume. The first is that unlike Trump, he will put much heavier weight on multilateralism, on international cooperation, on international institutions, and on transatlantic relations. I think we're going to see much closer relations and cooperation between the United States and Europe and NATO as a whole, very much different from Trump, who basically ignored, abandoned, or played it unilaterally. This naturally has a lot of consequences also for our part of the world, for the Middle East, when it comes to issues like Iran or Israeli-Arab relations and so on and so forth.
But General, let me be very open. Do you feel more secure now or less secure?
Well, I want to be careful about this because some of the things Trump did were very good for Israel's security. Some were more controversial, and the kind of jury is out. And I want to be careful about Biden, and because, for example, if Biden goes to deal with Iran, and that deal does not address the real faults of the initial deal, then I will feel less secure. But it's an open question whether or not we'll be there. I do believe, as was noted, that the Middle East is not going to be a high priority for the Biden administration. They will focus, as Shai said, on domestic issues, COVID-19, China, and some other issues, but the Middle East is not a high priority, perhaps with one exception, which is Iran, because they want to go back to the Iranian nuclear deal, the JCPOA. This administration, as I said, will put a premium on transatlantic relations. You will see the continuation of big power competition, because Biden is very tough when it comes to Russia, and Biden, I think, sees similar picture when it comes to China. He may be different in his style, but he will be tough on China. He will emphasize, unlike Trump, human rights, and this may come to play also in our part of the world, which is not characterized by honoring human rights, to say the least. So all of it, I think, taken together means that we're going to face a very, very different administration than Trump was. And I would add one final sentence. Here in the Middle East, the buzz is that the United States is in a historical mode of retreat from the Middle East, that the Middle East strategically is becoming less important to the United States. It is less dependent on Middle Eastern energy. It is focused on China. There's fatigue from wars in the Middle East and so on. And that's a general impression here. It started with Obama, continued with Trump, and may continue with Biden.
Thank you very much for this summary. I think we should stress in that moment that Biden also is very experienced in American politics and also in foreign policy. He was working as a senator since 1973, if I am correct, many years, and he was also several times in the Foreign Affairs Committee, so he knows the field, unlike Donald Trump, who was in politics and international affairs completely new. But from the other side, the world is changing. So this could be a new thing for Biden also to follow, all these changes. Let me switch to my friends from the Center for International Relations, our experts. Jerzy, you comment very often and you analyze the situation in Israel and also in the Middle East. What would you expect?
Well, first of all, we cannot really say what Biden can expect from the situation when he's taking the office. I mean, he's gonna be in the office January 20, which is practically nearly 2 months from now. That's gonna be the time he will be leading actually the country as such. And even today, as we speak, 2 days ago, there was an alleged meeting between Benjamin Netanyahu and the Saudis representation. What's going to happen within a week or two, we cannot tell. We cannot really tell to what extent Biden will have to deal with those problems or other problems in the future. So it's a question mark about actually the timing. Every American president so far tried to resolve the Palestinian-Israeli issue. And there's no reason to think that actually this one, Joe Biden, will not try to do that. So of course, Middle East is not so important as both gentlemen said, so important for the American strategy. However, for sure, Middle Eastern conflict is, and the Middle East situation is something what Biden will attach much importance when it comes to the American policy. A friend of mine recently said something very important, that actually what one American president did, it's going to be very difficult for his successor to undo. In other words, there are things that happened in the Middle East, there are things that were done by Trump on the Middle East as well, and Joe Biden will not go back from that. He will not, and from the announcement that he presented, we know that Joe Biden will not take Jerusalem, well, the capital back to Tel Aviv. Jerusalem will stay as a capital of Israel, well, in the American policy. But there are certain things that Joe Biden will undo when it comes to the American policy. For sure, he will, this is something what he already announced, he will restore the aid to the Palestinian movement. He will restore the contacts with the Palestinians as well. So there are things actually that will be changed when it comes to the American policy towards the Middle East peace process and the conflict. What Trump did was he actually excluded Palestinians from the Middle East peace process. In January 2020, there was a conference, of course, and there were Palestinians were offered the Palestinian state within 70% of the West Bank. Obviously, they rejected this, and since then, Palestinians were excluded from any more talks. And everything what was happening on the Middle East was happening like beyond the Palestinians. This may be the end of this situation. It may be actually the situation right now that Americans, along with the Europeans, and I hopefully have a chance to speak about it as well, may reinforce the situation, and it may, let me just explain you this in the following way. If we follow European statements after Abraham Accords, we can clearly hear the following sentence. We are satisfied with the accords between the Arab moderate states and Israel. But what we expect is in the following step, there's going to be a similar agreement between Israel and Palestinians, and there's going to be a Palestinian state established in the political horizon. That's kind of a European approach to the Middle East peace process. It's a one thing. It's not separated. What we experienced.
I can see, that there will be reactions on what you said from our friends from Israel. But before we continue the discussion, and please, I just feel free to comment at any time by putting your hand up. Bruno, also last question to you for this round. From the perspective, outside Israel, from the region's perspective, what are the expectations or maybe the hopes that, Biden will change some policy directions comparing to what Trump was doing in the Middle East?
Yes, let me start from Turkey. Just on the day of elections, almost on the day of elections, United States, when Americans were voting for new president and they elected Biden, in Turkey, President Erdogan decided to test S-400. So these missile systems bought from Russia. So I think the whole Middle East is testing United States, new administration. Yes, I think not just Turkey, but also Saudi Arabia. Yeah, and the secret meeting between Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and Saudi Crown Prince also was kind of testing. Even if Mike Pompeo was taking part in this meeting. The same with Jordan, the same with the whole Middle East. What they expect, and also Middle East expects, is a different tone, different methods, different methodology as regards dealing and tackling Middle Eastern problems. But for Iran, for example, also Europe is expecting new methods, and they're trying to make what to do with United States and new administration. Just these days, France, United Kingdom, and Germany are discussing how to engage United States again in rejoining joint comprehensive plan of action, so nuclear deal with Iran. But the problem is that it's not that easy. Why? Because what United States and Joe Biden expect from Iran is full compliance with nuclear deal, but Iran is not ready. What Iran expects is Americans to lift the sanctions. So the way is very thorny, I would say, and we don't expect any breakthroughs. I see much more continuation than we want to see.
Well, interesting. Interesting is that what you're saying about this testing, because what we can definitely say that Donald Trump was not an easy president for many, and this was very hard to predict really his reactions. Joe Biden may be seen as more predictable, but also it may be more professional in a way that, you know, if the reaction has to be done, it will be done. So what are your reactions on what was said, Mr. Bazak, please? And then General.
Listen, we talk about Trump, President Trump, and we said that he didn't have any experience. Of course, he came from the business world and swept Washington by storm. But if we look back, we can see that President Obama, for example, didn't have also any experience. He was serving 2 years as senator before he started his campaign for presidency, and before that he was a councilman in Chicago, a senator, a state senator.
But let's be frank that Obama's achievements in foreign policy are not the top ones he achieved. He's
right.
Very widely criticized for at least this sector, right?
You are absolutely right, and here we look at President Trump, and I want to shed some light about what he did, which was because maybe of his very different nature, was actually very good. Some concepts that we have are stayed with us for years, and we dare to change them, and we dare to challenge them, and we're afraid to change the concepts. And here comes this very wild person or president, very different one, kick this ball that stood there for years. And sometimes some people would say that the ball was already filled with water that didn't change for a lot of time, kicked it down. He moved the American embassy to Jerusalem, which many people, including in the State Department, used to say for many years that it might end in disaster. And it didn't. It was actually pretty good, and nothing came out of it, recognizing Jerusalem as the capital of the state of Israel, like any other country entitled to its own capitals. And we see now, in the last few months, the Abraham Accord, the actual relationship, open relationship with Arab countries. Who would dream about something like that? A year ago, 2 years ago, 6 years ago, European and many others around the world looked at the Middle East and Israel always through the Palestinian issue. And we got convinced in a way, all of us, that if the Palestinian issue will not be addressed, nothing will change in the Middle East. And suddenly we see, because of President Trump, we have to say it, although lots of people have lots of different opinion about him, but he kicked this stigma that was here, and he made a peace agreement with two important countries, which might, 3 important countries, which might extend now to many more countries, and change the paradigm and change the concept, which became to be very important because of the Palestinian issue. If we go back to this, the only way to achieve peace with the Palestinian for Israel, and I believe in it for many years, is for the Palestinian to understand that time is not playing for their favor. And as long as they wait and reject another initiative and another initiative and another initiative, which actually could give them an independent state years ago already, on most of the land that they believe belong to them, they could flourish now and have a fantastic flourish country now, living side by side with Israel, having peace, security, economy. We could have the same relationship that we have now with the Emirates. Why didn't they have it? Because they always believe, the Palestinians, that time is playing to their own favor. They said it many times in open interviews. We just have to wait, because the world is pushing Israel again and again. Nothing going to happen. No one will have peace agreement with Israel. They will just get pressed. And now they see that time can go to the other way, and the clock can go back. So now they have more motivation, I believe. And this is the absurd here. Maybe Trump brought them to the table now and will make it happen that peace can be achieved between us and the Palestinians. The only thing can happen when they understand that they have to make concessions themselves. Israel agreed to many concessions many years ago already. Now they might have to make their own concessions, to give up a little bit, and we can get eventually from this whole adventure a peace also with the Palestinians. So it's we have to say it for Trump that he did some good things too.
Let's see, maybe this Trump effect will be this effect of the newcomer who doesn't know, too many details, and it has a courage to, handle certain issues that everyone else would say it's not possible, it's not done. And then he did it, then he started it. Yes, that could be this positive effect as well. General, and then Jerzy.
Yes, first I agree with my colleague that Trump moved things. He commanded the attention of regional actors because of his unconventional ways of thinking and doing things, unpredictability, and the fact that he was somewhat assertive in the eyes of regional actors, so they responded to what he did. You can like it, you can't like it, everybody, each one according to his own approach, but he moved things and things happen. And some of the things I think are very important, like moving the US Embassy to Jerusalem, or mediating, brokering Israeli-Arab normalization, which I think is an historic move in the right direction, which will benefit the region and has far-reaching implications. Now, let's zoom in on some of the issues that the Biden administration will have to address. And I want to address several issues. First, on the issue of Iran, Biden already said that he would like to navigate the United States back to the deal, the US and Iran. First, get them back to compliance with the original terms of the deal, and then negotiate an improved, expanded deal that will include, first of all, address the flaws of the original deal and may expand it to include other elements which are not covered by the original deal, for example, Iranian regional behavior. There are many questions about this approach. I'm not sure it will work, but the biggest question is if you start lifting sanctions in order to get Iran back to the deal, what leverage are you going to have to move Iran to a next phase of a better deal? This is another question. It's a major source of concern for regional actors, for Israel, for Saudi Arabia, for the UAE. You already hear voices coming from the region telling the Biden administration, don't make this mistake. Don't go back to the deal on its original terms. You have leverage that Trump built, use it smartly, use it in the right way. So we have to wait and see what develops there. On Israeli-Arab normalization, I think the Biden team, the Biden administration will support it, will encourage it. I'm not sure they will push as hard as Trump did, but the trajectory will continue because it is the enlightened self-interest of regional actors to go down that road. They're doing it not because they want to please Americans, because it serves their own interests, okay? We have a dysfunctional region with failed state. After a decade of wars, you have Iran and its ambitions, you have Turkey and its ambitions, you have Islamists, and they understand that they have to partner with Israel in order to cope with these challenges. The third issue I want to mention is the Israeli-Palestinian issue. As was mentioned, Obama prioritized the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. I don't think Biden will prioritize it the same way. My understanding from engaging some people in the Biden team, they are not going to launch a peace initiative. They are not going to launch a peace plan. What they will do initially is resume contacts with the Palestinians, resume aid with to the Palestinians, reopen the U.S. consulate vis-a-vis the Palestinians, separate from the embassy, and some other measures. And they will focus on kind of what's called keeping the door open to a future solution, two-state solution, but not at this point pushing for negotiations. One other thing that I expect them to do is to look at the Israeli-Arab normalization as a potential opportunity to open space for Israeli-Palestinian peacemaking by engaging the Arabs and getting them to play a role also in the Israeli-Arab peace process. Final point on Turkey. I believe that we should expect a tougher US line vis-a-vis Turkey, tougher than Trump, because while there are many problems, Trump developed personal relationship with Erdogan. He has this affinity for autocrats, and they had this personal relationship, and he prevented sanctions against Turkey. I think Biden will be less tolerant, certainly on issues of East Mediterranean, human rights, and so on and so forth. Turkey is going to be a big dilemma for this administration because it's a member of NATO. It's an important regional actor. At the same time, it's a bigger and bigger headache for regional actors here because of its very ambitious, behavior, which disrupts stability in the Middle East.
So if I can answer that, actually, first actually to Shai Bazak, I completely agree with you. I mean, I think you took my words as me saying actually those things like to be a representative of a certain thought. I'm just saying what we can expect. And that may be on the horizon, that actually the new American administration will look at certain things without such a bold attitude as Trump had. He will continue, of course, I mean, the new administration will continue something what happened actually when it comes to the Arab-Israeli normalization, which is, of course, absolutely, which is something bold, and it was something good actually for the whole region. I'm just saying that maybe they will have a different view on the Palestinians, and they will maybe treat Netanyahu-led government with more influence when it comes to including Palestinians into the whole peace process. That might be the expectation. Maybe not at the beginning, but later. There will going to be expectations, for example, to freeze the settlement. The settlements are still going on. Annexation is off the table, at least for now, which will be embraced by the new American administration. But the settlement is still an issue. And sooner or later, that's my concern. Sooner or later, it may be an issue between the right-wing government in Israel and the Democratic Party president in the US. Because historically speaking, it was always an issue. If you look back in the history of the American presidents and the relations with the Benjamin Netanyahu, especially. So that might be something what can sooner or later explode as a grenade actually in the hands of bilateral relations between America and Israel. Europe will have a major problem. Mm-hmm.
No,
you can interrupt, of course. No, please do. If you want to jump in, please do.
I was just seeing, Shai reacting, so I think maybe you want to just immediately.
Please, Shai. I mean, just we have, answer. I think, more open. So I'm. Mm-hmm.
Sure. It's a common view. What you said now, we don't know, of course, what's going to happen. As we just quote some Israeli politician who used to say that it's very hard to make predictions, especially in order to the future. So, it's hard to see what's going to happen. But of course, the history of Netanyahu was better with the Republican Party, but the history of the relationship of Israel with the United States were not always better than the Republicans and the Democrats. Also, the inner politics in the United States of the politicians of the Democratic Party. It used to be a time that the Republicans didn't want to be involved in wars or other areas around the world, and the Democrats wants to get involved. And now it's became a bit to the other side in the last few years, and maybe it will move back. So we don't know what's going to happen. I think both President Biden and President-elect and Vice President-elect Kamala Harris knows Israel very well, and they are from the moderate part of the Democratic Party. I don't see any problem, a major problem for Israel in Washington. Israel and Washington will be in a very strong relationship. There are lots of common interest in the Middle East and in the US. It's not just just a friendship or personal relations, but a common interest. But one important common interest that we share, I believe, and here comes, I spoke about the good things that President Trump did, but also in favor of Biden. We have to remember that the most important thing for Israel, maybe for Poland too, or to the world, is the United States will remain very strong. Strong from the inside, less, inner problems they have now, and strong toward the world, with allies, with partnerships, with understanding, and not just standing there alone and fighting with other countries around the world. And here looks like that President Biden administration will embrace this approach. And when your most important ally, as the United States, for Israel, maybe for Poland too, getting stronger and more influencer around the world, it's good for us too. So on this path, it might be a good start for Biden's administration. As I said before, we Israelis, I guess that you Polish too, do not vote in the United States election. So
some Poles do.
Some of us
some
do,
Poles do, yeah.
So we just can analyze and hope that this important country will be strong, will get united again, and will influence what they can do in a good way throughout the world, because it's important to the stability of the world. Shimon Peres, the late president of Israel, once told me something very interesting about the United States. When I brought as an ambassador from the United States, as consul general, some delegations of governors, and he told them, you know what fascinating about the United States? And said what? And he said, United States is the only superpower in the history of humankind that's gain and preserve its power, not by taking, but by giving.
Mm-hmm.
So let's hope that this amazing country will be strong. It's good for all of us.
Well,
so if I can add one sentence to what Shai
yes,
just
please,
said.
General.
There is a story about our first Prime Minister, David Ben-Gurion, when he met President Kennedy in the 60s, in the early 60s. And when they finished their meeting and Kennedy accompanied him out, Kennedy asked him, is there anything I can do for Israel? And his answer was, be a great president for the United States.
Well, that's true, but also, you know, what Shai was saying was a very sad description of America under Donald Trump, because we just said that America lost all this. His greatness, it's, you know, how to say, soft power, hard power, not so much, but soft power, yes, in a sense. We can see it also in Europe. That's why we hope so much for Biden. And on the other side, also, there are very many voices also within the America itself, that Americans have to look at its own, their own internal situation, that they should make, you know, order at home instead of looking everywhere else. And you also said yourself that the first year will be definitely a pandemic and, you know, concentration on internal matters. But there are many other things on the list, you know, infrastructure, which is horrible, healthcare system, which is not working very well, education, which is pathetic as far as primary and secondary schools, maybe not so much at the university level, still very good. So the Americans have a lot of things to do, and the new president has to handle this as well. So my question would be, you know, if this is maybe not the biggest challenge now, also for us Europeans, that Americans will have to concentrate a little bit more on themselves. Jerzy, let's continue your thought.
If I can continue, I fully agree with what you said, actually, when you said about America is taking care of themselves right now. They will have to, but on the other hand, they will have to reestablish I wouldn't say the supremacy, but its position, especially within the Western world, that they lost during the Trump administration. And I'm not talking about becoming, again, a policeman of the West. I'm talking about a moral compass, of certain values that actually America shared, and they tend to about it during the Trump administration. And for sure, actually, they will get to Europe. They will reestablish the connection with the old continent. They will try to build a larger alliance against China, but not, of course, as a military, not in the military aspects, but rather in terms of the economical cooperation. They will have to deal with Iran in many different aspects. But in all of it, when you put it together, sooner or later, and I'm sorry to go back to the very small and tiny field that we started, sooner or later, they will address the issue of the Palestinians.
Okay,
because the Palestinian state is something what is much more symbolic than we sometimes think it is.
Let me ask Bruno, what is your understanding and what is also your take on the Palestine-Israeli issue? Because in the region, it's not only Israel who is interested in this issue. It's not only Israel who is commenting on that. And of course, if you can comment more on the Turkish position, because if they test the administration of Biden, what precisely you have in mind for the nearest, few months to come? You have to unmute yourself. I just hope they will not test anymore in November and December, waiting for the new president to take over.
Let me comment on General Herzog's what he said about Turkey and United States. Turkey has isolated itself with its adventurous, I would say, assertive policies. We all remember what very famous Turkish foreign minister Ahmet Davutoglu said in the early 2000s. He said that his plans for Turkey is zero problems with neighbors. Now what we see are zero neighbors. Yes, so it's a complete disaster for Turkey. Turkey has itself created anti-Turkish coalitions in Eastern Mediterranean, in the Middle East, the same in Libya, for example. We have there United Arab Emirates, Saudi Arabia, to some extent Israel as regards Greece and Eastern Mediterranean. Yeah. So this is why Turkey has to do something with it, with disastrous economic situation when they have to pay for $1.08 lira. Yeah. But I think that new Biden administration, of course, they will be much tougher than Trump, who had kind of bromance with President Erdogan as regards human rights record, rule of law, and Eastern Mediterranean. But at the end of the day, Turkey is too valuable partner for United States or for NATO to ignore. I think after some time, maybe next year, end of next year, we expect situation to go back to normal. Yes, it's like that always. When there's new administration, a problem with Turkey. We remember what was happening when Trump started his administration. Yes, as regards the Palestinian issue, Turkey is quite exceptional because Turkey is visited regularly by Hamas leaders. Yes, is supporting Hamas. Turkey has, of course, cooperation with just one Arab country, which is Qatar. And Turkey was not quite happy when this normalization process started in the Middle East between Israel and Arab states. But I think the normalization process will continue. Saudi Arabia doesn't need to be formal official part of it because they cooperate closely with Israel. As regards Palestinian issue, Turkey as a former, let's say, protector and guardian of Palestine until 1917, it must do what it does. Yes, but this is in terms of, verbal things, slogans. But they can do nothing as regards reality on the ground. And my view is very pessimistic. I think that in foreseeable future, I don't expect a creation. I don't expect a two-state solution. Yeah, even with new approach of Biden, I think is more verbal than real in the long perspective.
And
Dr. Bonikowska, can I just jump in for a moment and take your role for a second? So that would be my question actually to Shai Bazak and General Herzog. What is your when you think about a vision of the resolution of the conflict between Israelis and Palestinians? what is the solution in your view? What can you see in 10 or 15 years from now when it comes to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict?
General Herzog is one of the highest experts of Israel in this particular issue. So I will let him lead this answer, because he's really one of the best
it's not easy.
you can find in Israel on this issue.
Look, I spent 25 years of my life negotiating with the Palestinians. Beginning in 1993, I was in all of Israel's negotiations with Palestinians. It is a very, very, very tough issue and a very, very, very complex issue. And I think the current leadership on both sides actually cannot come to terms on this, okay? And we had far-reaching proposals on the table, Israeli and Americans, which were rejected by the Palestinian leadership. I do not believe that the current Palestinian leadership is capable of taking these decisions. We have a political crisis in Israel anyway right now. We may be headed to fourth elections in 2 years, so this is not the time to take such decisions. I think that it's time for re-examining some basic assumptions about this conflict. And I'm not saying that it is impossible to find a solution where we can separate politically to two political independent entities, but it would require some different thinking. In this sense, while I see a lot of flaws in the Trump peace plan, some of the elements there reflect at least an attempt to try some kind of paradigm shift, and some of it was mentioned earlier. It will probably not be on the table before you have a next Palestinian leadership and maybe a future Israeli government. I think it is time to look at the conflict as a multi-dimensional kaleidoscope. There was a tendency historically to single out one element and focus on it as if this will solve everything. Either, I don't know, Jerusalem or refugees or settlements or you name it, or negotiations. It's a multi-dimensional element with many, many dimensions, and you have to address all of them. Some of them, like education, are long-term. You're not going to solve them in 1 or 2 years. They are long-term. Education for peace is lacking. Definitely, if you look at Palestinian textbooks, it's not there. So that's a long-term proposition. And I think we have to also adapt a different approach than the one we had during our negotiations, which was nothing is agreed until everything is agreed, which means all or nothing. And ultimately, it's nothing because we couldn't agree on everything. We need a more flexible approach where we agree on certain things and we implement them and we move on. And we can agree on a partial approach, incremental approach, interim settlements, and so on. If we try to go all the way to solving all the issues, we may not succeed for a very long time. And time, I don't think, is running in their favor or our favor. It depends what you do with times. That's where I am on this issue.
Thank you. I guess until the current government is in power, Benjamin Netanyahu is in power, nothing much will change. And also in the meantime, the US also will not be maybe a very helpful factor because they will be rather concentrated on their own stuff. But I must ask you about one more element we haven't discussed yet, because everybody knows that we are facing America-China rivalry. And China is an element, is a country who will play an incredibly important role vis-a-vis the USA, but also vis-a-vis to all of us. Europe is very much concerned. I guess Israel is concerned as well. And China is present in the Middle East too. China is present everywhere. So my question would be, what would you expect from this, well, maybe not yet war, but rivalry in all sectors, technology, economy, trade, but also narratives, the war, the information war is also on the table. Do you think this could play a role in the situation in the Middle East in any way? Maybe Shai, then General, and the experts.
China is an elephant who stand in the room of the whole world in the middle. And if we spoke about the changing in the American administration, we have to remember one battle that President Trump made in front of the Chinese, which we didn't look at it so closely, but it was actually interesting. Apparently, China is considered not a very developed country in comparison to Europe or the United States. So the regulation in regards to post, mailing, and others were different to China than to Europe and the United States. So the voters who vote for Trump found out, together with Trump very early after he got elected, that in order to manufacture a simple cup or a glass or a clothes in the United States and to ship it to the next town, or to manufacture it in China and ship it all the way to the United States, it's cheaper to buy it from China than in the United States. But not because of the reasons that we think that it's cheap labor, so they can make it, manufacture it much cheaper, but because of the mail, the post cost less to post it. All these big cartons and from China to the United States, then from one town to another within the United States.
That seems really
so
absurd.
Even if you manufacture it in the same price, it would cost more to buy American made than China made. And this is why many Americans didn't make a living. And President Trump changed these rules in the, it's an international criteria, international body. So to look at this little corner of this discussion and to understand the big picture of where we stand with this, and every country has its own issues with it. So, and it's a big issue. It's not something that President Biden now will ignore and said they will keep dealing with all these trade agreements and trade issues, and definitely it's going to be a big issue to keep standing in the middle of the room.
General?
I believe that the competition between the United States and China will continue under Biden. This is a big issue, much bigger than Trump or Biden. We're talking about superpowers with interest, and I think this is going to continue to be a very big issue. Biden may adopt a different behavior. He may not be as bullying as Trump was on some issues, but he's going to be tough on China, and he will definitely be tougher on human rights violations. You have a situation where about 1 million Muslim Uyghurs are incarcerated in camps in China, and I think Biden will be much less tolerant on this issue. For us here in Israel and Europe as well, I think we have to develop a strategy of how to navigate in between these two giants, because we have some trade interests with China, but at the very same time, the US is our strategic ally and hugely important and a priority for us. And I believe Europe is a similar situation, having to navigate there. And I noted that recently the foreign ministers of the E3 defined relations with China as China being at one of the same time a partner, a competitor, and a systemic rival of Europe. So I think this calls for very close dialogue between Israel and Europe on lessons learned from how to deal with this, how to navigate. We here in Israel, under American pressure, had to adopt some regulations when it comes to introducing national security considerations to allowing Chinese investment in Israeli infrastructure and so on. We have to do more, and I believe that Europe is experiencing similar dilemmas, and this really calls for a very close dialogue between us.
It's very much true. The difference is only that European Union is composed of 27 member states, and we don't have really one position vis-a-vis China yet. We have still some differences between some groups within this 27. But we are understanding that at the times, the high time comes to have a concrete strategy against China or towards China. Bruno, I wanted to ask you, because maybe you can just describe for us what is the Chinese approach towards the region, towards the Middle East, because from the Chinese perspective, this is also a point on the map they are looking for.
Yeah, it's very interesting. First I want to say what one of the American senators said. I don't remember which one. He said that actually what Soviet Union was trying to do with the United States, they try to keep up and maybe catch up with the United States to some extent militarily. But what China is doing, China is trying to replace the United States on the global scene. Yeah. As regards Middle East, China is pretty much everywhere in the Middle East, from Israel to Iran to Saudi Arabia, and this is why it must behave in completely different way than the United States. Yes, because for example, China is a main economic partner for Iran, even if trade between China and Iran dropped by like more than 60%, in oil trade 90%, yeah. But still, Iran is like on the life support from China. But exactly for the reasons I have mentioned, China needs to be very cautious in its policies, because for them both Iran and Saudi Arabia are strategic partners, or comprehensive strategic partners. Yeah. So China is the only country, only big power in the world, I would say global power, which can conduct such policy, yes, such foreign policy, to be partner at the same time for enemies like Saudi Arabia and Iran. This is why they need to balance its foreign policy, and they can do that perfectly, because Saudi Arabia is very interested in cooperation with China as regards technology, as regards exports of gas and oil, and this, especially when United States is such a competitor on energy market. So for China, Middle East is an extremely valuable partner, but China doesn't have the same strategic interests, political interests as United States or even Russia in the Middle East. Yes, but the problem is, as with, for example, British Empire, in the very beginning, it had in India just, in East Asia, just economic trade interest, but later they brought military. So I think always behind Chinese interest, economic interest, there are strategic interests. Yeah, whatever Chinese say, either in Europe or in the Middle East. And Chinese experts, for example, military experts and intelligence experts are pretty much present also in Syria. So Chinese are present also militarily and as regards intelligence in Syria, of course. But basically for China, Middle East is an strategic economic partner, and they cannot jeopardize their interest by taking sides.
Right, but in this situation, the statement that China is trying maybe to replace the United States, I just wonder if this is really possible in the Middle East. I don't think it is really possible in Europe. Despite all the differences we Europeans can have with the United States, I think the transatlantic alliance stays strong, and with Biden it will be even stronger. I believe the same works with Israel. I just cannot imagine any other alliance who would be stronger. While I'm not so sure about other countries, especially Iran, because in this case the partnership can work, and also the other countries of the region may have deals with China. I wonder what is your opinion, gentlemen. Maybe General and Shai can comment on that.
Well, I doubt that China can really be a leading party in the Middle East or replace the United States. For one thing, Chinese are, of course, our part of the world is on their map of One Belt, One Road initiative. It's part of their thinking about strategic trade and energy routes from China to Europe and to the south. But at the same time, Chinese are very careful about their investments. They do not interfere in war zones, for example. Their investment in Syria, for example, is very, very limited. I know that many people try to get them to play a role in Gaza and they refuse. They are very careful about, putting their hands into war zones. Secondly, China doesn't have really soft power. It has hard power and they use it sometimes brutally, but they don't really have soft power. And to some actors in the Middle East, it still matters. So, while people like to draw Chinese investment, I would say this goes up to a point and not beyond that. And I'm not convinced that China would like to be the dominant actor here in the Middle East, which is characterized by so many problems and so many failed states and so on and so forth.
Shai?
We just have to, I know we are talking here about the Middle East and about the issues of the Middle East and then the effect of China on the Middle East. We include Israel on it, but in this matter, and actually in many other matters, almost all of them, Israel is more part of Europe than part of the Middle East. Our legs are in the Middle East, but our heart and mind are in Europe. It's more a European country by many, many measures, including this matter of China. We have a problem with Chinese support of Iran. And we should not forget another big player here, Russia, who tried to get influence in the Middle East too by supporting Iran and based in Russia. But on this matter of the giants, United States and China and the dispute between them, Israel is standing, I believe, more where Europe stands than the other Middle East countries.
Right. Jerzy, to you, I would like to have a question in more strategic terms. It's not only about Biden. Well, it's about another decade we are now entering. How you visualize the situation in the Middle East? I know that to predict the future is the most difficult, as Shai said. But let's try to see what can happen, taking into consideration that we will have the rivalry US-China still, maybe even more, that China may have an attractive offer in technological terms. It's already, many people say that China is really a superpower in technology. We are discussing 5G, we are discussing, the fifth industrial revolution, that China is taking the lead slowly. And then we are taking into consideration also that China doesn't put difficult questions to any regimes. It doesn't have a democratization agenda. It doesn't want any reforms. It just makes deals. So in the long run, in 10 years to come, how would you describe what can happen in the Middle East, not only in Israel, but in the whole region, taking into consideration this match, this rivalry?
That's so complicated. I mean, it's much more complicated to predict actually the Palestinian-Israeli peace process in 10 or 20 years than to answer that question. Honestly, I have no idea. The thing is that we can actually extract what happened in Africa. We can really see actually how much, to what extent, actually there were also failed states. I wouldn't be so pessimistic, General, to think that actually, okay, Middle East is a mess, so China is not going to be interested actually in investing money into this region. I think they would. That's why I'm also would be rather strategic. Well, when you think about the US and the new administration, and they may potentially not be so interested in the Middle East anymore, they should. Exactly from that reason. If they feel the void in the Middle East, there's going to be somebody filling that void. It's not going to be probably Russia, maybe Turkey, maybe someone else, but maybe China as well. I wouldn't be so like looking at China from the. I agree with the statement of some of you actually said that China is not interested in the militaries. I mean, they had hard investments and hard power, but well, when it comes to the military, they are not so. They will be sooner or later. You cannot be a superpower without handling the very strong politics and the strong strategy. And when I see Africa, that is already beyond our control what is happening there, I can imagine this center on the Middle East soon. Maybe not soon, in the perspective of 20 years.
Well,
and I will leave.
I do not disagree with a lot of what you said. All I'm saying is that between that and seeing China is the dominant international power in the Middle East, I think there is still a distance. China, first of all, there are many local actors who would not prefer China to either Russia or the United States. There will still be a competition with Russia and maybe partly the United States. China doesn't have the same soft power that they have. So yes, you will see much more investment in the region, but not to the point of becoming the dominant external actor. That's what I'm saying.
Mm-hmm.
If I can just continue just for a moment before Shai starts talking, but I can see, and talking to Shai, by the way, actually, I can see the great potential in between Arab moderate states and Israel. Something what happened really actually like 5 weeks ago or 6 weeks ago, it was extraordinary. It's something what is beyond the description, and this, the velocity and energy of the cooperation between Israel, even Emirates and the Bahrain, and when you see the companies flowing back and forth, exchanging, I mean, it's amazing. It's something what cannot be reversed, and it's something what will be very progressing in upcoming decade. There's no going back from that, and that's I'm very optimistic about it.
Yeah, we are all, and I think it's going to affect the Palestinians eventually too, and I hope very much this will affect the European view toward the Middle East in general and to Israel in particular.
Well, I think I would add one more element that would, time changes everything. And even, the perception, which changes very slowly. Perception changes very slowly. But it has changed in the sense that we Europeans even see Israel now as a stability factor in the region. Being, not, as Shai said, of course, more Western country, let's say, in the region than all the others, but also very stable country and very, very developed country and military very stable. Actually, maybe the only one who would be able to react immediately if anything happens. We have, war with terror. We have so many internal factors as well. So in this case, we can have also a different perception 10 years to come that Israeli and Arab world can also cooperate, maybe, instead of having issues. So this is one comment. And second is that, there will be some elements which will bring us together, definitely. I just noticed that there are some decisions by Joe Biden taken already. Anthony Blinken will be the Secretary of State, who was actually Assistant Secretary of State under Obama, and John Kerry, who was Secretary of State under Obama. Now he will have this portfolio of environment and climate. So in a way, General, there will be a lot of elements of Obama third term, as you mentioned. Definitely will be also many differences, but I would ask you about what really else than the internal issues in Israel and Palestinian-Israeli problems and the Middle East situation. What else can bring us together in the years to come? What is the same on our agenda? And I also see that Bruno wants to comment. Maybe I will start with Bruno and then with two gentlemen. Bruno.
Yes, actually, I wanted to comment on what General Herzog said. Actually, there is an exception as regards China and its will to take risks in war zones. This exception is Sudan and South Sudan. China started its cooperation with Sudan very early, 1990s, later 2000s, And what's interesting, when there was separation between Sudan and South Sudan, China didn't withdraw. Even later, when the civil war started between vice president and president of South Sudan, they didn't withdraw. More, they brought peace forces. Why? Because they wanted to have live combat experience. Exactly, it's the only reason why they brought peacekeeping forces to South Sudan. More, behind the scenes, China was trying to make peace between warring parties in South Sudan. They achieved success, very fragile, but still. So I think South Sudan is kind of experiment for China for the future adventures or policies, yes, in Africa especially, yeah, because just look what happened during the when Arab Spring started. Let's say Arab Spring or Arab Winter in Libya. I would prefer Arab Winter in Libya. China sent first time in history its military ships to Libya. Same was in Yemen. Yeah. So I think South Sudan is kind of experiment for China. What they may follow in the zones where their interests are threatened. This is what I wanted to comment.
Right. So you bring back China as a topic, but I repeat my question. I would much rather now discuss what will bring us together else than being against China. General.
Well, I think that there is a rich agenda to pursue. First of all, generally speaking, we are all coping with COVID, and it's an ample area to cooperate on finding solutions. Also, thinking about the future. It's not going to be the last, unfortunately, natural disaster that hits us. There are going to be climate change challenges and many other natural challenges that we have to cope with. And I think this calls for more cooperation, cross-border cooperation. If you look at Corona, initially each country looked after itself, but then understood that they have to cooperate with others and need to prepare for the future. We have also some security challenges that we have to think about together in terms of, that relates to stability, the superpower role. You're impacted by a superpower close to your borders. We have some superpowers now as our neighbors here in that we have to cope with, and we can discuss and some lessons learned from these issues. There are issues of counterterrorism, cybersecurity, and many other issues. I can offer really a rich agenda for bilateral discussion and cooperation. Looking at the Middle East, I think while the Middle East is characterized by many challenges, there are also opportunities. And definitely Israeli-Arab normalization offers opportunities for the region and for others as well. If I were looking at it from the outside, I would say this is a dysfunctional region. Let's look where are what I call anchors of stability, functionality, and so on, and work with them. Israel is such an island. The UAE is such an island, and you can tie some of these anchors together and start developing maybe something which is better for the region and for others as well. And I would encourage Europeans to be part of what's happening here, to be part of new realities in the Middle East, to join hands with this newly born Israeli-Arab cooperation to the benefit of all of us.
Shai?
Of course, I agree with General Herzog about everything he said. We can also mention that we should and we could and we will fight terrorism together. I believe that's now in Europe, many Europeans experience what Israel experienced for years, when radical Islamists running around the streets and beheading teachers or blowing up shops. I think we understand together now that we have to fight extreme Islam and terrorism. Not all Islam, of course. There are many, of course, good things about Islam, but extremist Islamists and the terrorism, Shia or Sunni, both supported by Iran and Hezbollah, who deal with many crimes in Europe, smuggling and laundry money and others, and the terrorists themselves. So I think we should cooperate on this and definitely be part of this big process of the Middle East peace process, the big peace process. Palestinians will take time. We'll solve it eventually. I don't think it should be the center of our attention. And we have so many things to do with the technology and cooperation with technology, cyber, agriculture, water. We have so many partners. And as I said, on this matter and many others, we are part of Europe, Israel. It's not just in vain that we are singing together in the Eurovision and playing basketball together in the EuroLeague and do so many things together. So we should continue to.
I would stress this technology aspect because you know, now this is it seems to be really the key issue. It's the technology stupid, in a sense that if China wins, it will win not because of trade, it will win because of the technology. In a sense of domination, of course, we Europeans don't want, you know, have a bipolar world again. That's the last thing we would expect, to have the world divided into two again, and China replacing the Soviet Union. But in the multipolar world, multilateral world, you know, those who will have technologies, these will be the places where people want to live, where people will want to work. So I think Europeans understand that Europe would like to remain the best place, or one of the best places for people to live. Jerzy, last word will go to you, and we will close our discussion.
Thank you. I mean, I fully agree actually what you all said about, actually, especially in the end. I think also Europe has to change when it comes to, and I'm just going to go back to our original, you know, topic, that we have to change about the Middle East peace process, that our attitude that we have sticking strictly to this 1967 borders and the Green Line and all of those ancient, in a way, solutions, as General Herzog said, that we have to be flexible in the future. That's something what Europe has to learn, because we're just very limited actually with certain documents that were just from the past era. So that's, I wish to change when it comes to the European-Israeli relations. I mean, it's for the last 10 or 15 years, Israel participated in practically every European program. I think Israel benefited the most from the third world countries, I mean, from the countries outside Europe, when it comes to the technological exchange, and it will progress, it will foster. There's no going back from this either. So, I mean, it's very I'm very optimistic when it comes to European-Israeli relations. No question about that.
And putting it even in the larger sense, because we wanted, first of all, to discuss the results of the American elections on the Middle East, that we maybe think again, we would like to think again about this concept of the West, and definitely from this perspective, Israel is a Western country, and Europe and the US are the Western alliance, and this transatlantic alliance can be even stronger. And I think it's a big question mark what brings us really to the concept of the West today in such a difficult and different reality from where we were after the Second World War. So let's discuss this further next time. Thank you very much for your time today. Thank you, Bruno Surdel. Thank you, Jerzy Wójcik from Poland, Center for International Relations. And thanks a lot our guests from Israel, Shai Bazak from ELNET and General Michael Herzog. Thank you, ELNET. Thank you, Marta Kubica, for help for this meeting. And I invite you to be with us. We will have 3 more discussions, 4 takes about the Middle East. Thank you. Goodbye.